The name's Bond, Grant Bond. Only problem is Moneypenny's taken off with all the cash, so today we're looking at a V8 Vantage rather than the new Valor. You can pick these up for as little as £23,000 on the used marketplace. But before you do that, let me take you through all the common problems, show you everything that tends to go wrong, so you can go in there with a bit of knowledge. Let's go. So let's kick off, shall we, with likely one of the big reasons as to why you're considering a V8 Vantage. The engine, that tremendous V8 engine. So depending on the year that you buy, that's going to determine the engine that you get. So pre-2008, you're going to get this, the 4.3 litre V8, songful, characterful, 385 brake horsepower. It was quite widely criticised for not having enough power. I don't believe that. I think it's more than enough for the road, and the engine's so characterful that it makes up for it. Now obviously if you buy beyond 2008, that's when Aston Martin started to put the 4.7 litre engines into these. More power, 426 brake horsepower. That certainly righted all the complaints of people saying it didn't have enough power. However, if you are thinking about one of these, don't just jump to that later 4.7 engine, especially with what we've learned in recent years, the problems that have started to rear their heads, most notably the big end bearing failure. Now, the suspected cause of these big end bearing failures, rearing their heads more and more, is that Ford decided to change the material that they were made from. They moved away from a lead-based material to a tin-based material. Now, the tin-based material, it was strong, it did pass all the durability tests, but if a little bit of debris gets in there, sits on the tin, it can eat away at the surface, cause delamination, and that's what's resulting in the bearing failure. That's according to several specialists who are very, very knowledgeable on that engine. So don't just jump to the 4.7, do consider the 4.3, because in comparison, we very, very rarely see the big end bearing failures on this earlier 4.3 engine. Now don't get me wrong, the 4.3 was not without fault, however nothing as serious as the 4.7 big end bearing failure. Most notably on these, it was an oil leak. Now if you've done any research into these cars at all, you've probably seen claims of the timing chain cover leaking, and it is the case on an awful lot of these engines. See, a lot of owners, they'll just kind of ignore this leak or they'll live with it. It's going to depend on the severity and how much oil it's losing, but it's not going to get any better. It usually starts small and it will get worse as time goes on. What eventually happens is there's enough oil coming out of there that it's going to coat the bottom of the car, it's going to stick to the hot exhaust, so you're going to smell it as you get out the car. It's just going to make a bit of a mess. You're going to notice it on your driveway eventually. Now the reason that a lot of owners do just sort of put it to the back of their mind is because it's not a cheap job. Ideally the engine needs to come out, so you're probably talking 10 hours to do that. To fix the gasket itself, you're probably talking 6-7 hours, and then obviously reinstallation of the engine back into the car, another 10 hours. So to try and give you a ballpark figure, you're probably looking anywhere between 3,500 and 5,500 to get that oil leak rectified. A pricey old problem, so make sure on the one that you're thinking about buying, you get a good look underneath that engine. Get under there, have a look. It's on the front leading edge of the engine. You'll see it, it'll just be a bit grubby, and if it's bad, as I say, you'll see some oil hanging around under the car as well. Real world filming, we're trying to get on with the car, but there's a herd of sheep coming our way. Welcome to Scotland. Now the other big consideration on one of these cars is the clutch. That might sound a bit generic, but the reason it's so prudent to make sure the clutch is in good order is it's not cheap. Much like a lot of other exotic cars, Ferraris, Lamborghinis and so on, it's very expensive to get a clutch job done. You're probably talking in the region of £3,000–4,000 if you put it into a specialist and get them to supply the parts, do the labour and so on. Now obviously it's going to depend on what gearbox the car has as to how you're going to check if the clutch is okay. If it's the non-manual sport shift gearbox, then independent dealers or main dealers, they can actually plug into the car and get an estimate of the clutch life remaining. That's well worth doing if you're looking at one of those cars, because you can bring that into the bargain, maybe negotiate a bit off if that clutch is getting a little bit worn. In a manual car like this one, then it's the good old-fashioned method of getting it out on the road, third, fourth gear, maybe an uphill section, floor the throttle, make sure it's not slipping, make sure it's not juddering. An expensive issue, so make sure it's not happening on the one that you're buying. Now as for the bodywork on the Aston that you're considering buying, let's start here. Lights. So as you can see on this car, really common, they get condensation build-up inside them. Both the front and the rear lights can get this. Now on the rear there is a good DIY guide out there that shows you how you can drill a couple of holes in the bottom of it, allow the light unit to dry out, and that does seem to work pretty well. The problem, apart from looking a bit poor, is you run the risk with condensation in there of actually damaging the light unit, so it's really not good to have. Now, as for elsewhere on the body, other things you want to consider is corrosion. These cars are known to have a little bit of corrosion, so you want to look round the wings, you want to look along the edge of the windscreen here. These are the points where they're known to start corroding, but check the whole car of course, and also along the bottoms of the doors. Just a small thing to mention, on this iconic front grille, they're supported by little vertical slats, as you can see, but as is the case on this car, occasionally one or two of them can go missing and make it a little bit loose. Now you can get these online, aftermarket companies make them, so you can pick them up and replace them before it gets too loose. Now as we hop into this interior, first thing to tell you about the door struts. Now, they've got these really nice doors that kind of move upward to avoid high curbs, which is really clever, but they're on a strut, which means you can leave the door wherever you want. Quite a clever system. Problem is, as these struts age, the door can start to close over itself, and it is a heavy old door. You don't want to be taking one of these to the kneecap. Now before I hop into this interior and show you what you need to check in there, quick favour ask from you. If you're getting value from this video, please do consider hitting the subscribe button. We create these buyer's guides for literally every type of car, and your support means an awful lot. If you're enjoying the video, hit the like button and also let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Okay, interior, let's go. Inside this really rather wonderful interior, everything's metal or luxurious leather. Must be said, they're still really nice despite the car's age. There's a couple of things for you to check in here. So first up is the sat-nav screen. This was a known issue, wherein it wouldn't raise at all, or it wouldn't raise without a little bit of help. The problem behind it was the little gears that operate it. Now, Aston Martin actually released a repair kit for this. It was that much of a known problem. So the repair kits are out there. You can rectify it, not the end of the world, but of course, check it on the car before you hand over your hard-earned. The other thing to have a look at is the headliner. Now these cars are getting a little bit older, the adhesive is giving up and these are starting to sag or fall off altogether. Again, it's nothing that a good interior trimmer can't fix, but of course you want to notice it before you hand over your money. Now the only other things to have a look at in here, just small annoyances, much like some of the Ferraris and Lamborghinis of similar era, the dash leather can shrink. Now this is more the case in hotter climates, not so much the UK. But have a look. Again, it's something that a good leather trimmer could sort out for you. And finally, have a look at all the little screens, the radio display in both of the screens and the clocks as well. These can sometimes distort, almost as if someone's pushed their thumb into the middle of it. And it's just annoying. It's just another thing to fix, and you don't want to be noticing it after you've bought the car. Right, I think that's about enough from here. Let's get the car out on the road, hear some of that V8 noise, and I'll tell you about the rest of the problems. So one thing I would like to add to the video is this car was very kindly given to us by Supercar Hire Scotland. If you're in the market to hire something like this, then check out these guys, really professional, all the cars are top notch. I'll put a link to them in the description below. Just been coming through a little very typical Scottish town there, Doon for any of you who know it. And it makes me realise why so many people put these things on daily duties, because some of you might know I've got a Ferrari 360 as well, and trying to navigate that thing through a little town with speed bumps and loads of people and tight roads, it's not fun at all. But in this little Aston, good visibility, controls are nice and easy. You can see why people did use them every day, and then when the road opens up a bit, you've got that wonderful V8. And on note of that, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of people tend to jump straight to the 4.7. They think it's the latest, the greatest, it's the one to go for. But honestly, I wouldn't. I think I'd be more looking towards one of these 4.3s. And you're going to get a well-sorted 4.3 for, well, £25,000, £26,000. It's not going to be much more than that. So, I mean, why wouldn't you? Anyway, I'm waffling a bit. You're here to hear about the problems of them, of course. I get carried away driving these things. Now, the last thing to tell you about is a stiff gear change. Now, some of them were afflicted by this. I have driven some that had that problem. It really does get quite stiff. It's either the cables or the gearbox oil that causes that. If you speak to some of the specialists, they'll take a look at the gear cables for you, make sure everything's aligned correctly, and if that doesn't resolve it, then swapping out the gearbox oil to a different type does tend to make it far better. So if the one that you're driving, you do find it's a little bit on the stiff side, do keep that in mind. There are remedies out there. But there you have it. You now have everything you need to go off and find yourself a fantastic Aston Martin V8 Vantage. Thank you so much for watching. Please do hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and I'll see you for the next video.